So you said on your own podcast that you weren't really sure what you wanted to do after school, but you decided to go to university anyway. Now that's a pretty significant commitment of time and money, especially if you're not sure what you wanted to do. So what motivated you to want to go to university and sort of incur that commitment?
Good question. I think partly part of that is just being young and naive at the time as well. So it was just the standard thing. You finish school and you're like, you're going to go to uni, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to uni. And then I've just always been interested in that kind of sport, exercise, training, all that sort of stuff.
Oh, I should say you went to uni to study sports science, but it was
so
coaching
it was called
science.
Coaching science at the time, but it's literally now just your exercise science degree.
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and I kind of just followed my interest really and looked interesting, so I ended up going there. But at the time, I definitely didn't think about the cost or any of that sort of stuff. That just never entered my head. It was just like, yeah, I'm just going to go study this and see what happens pretty much.
Did you have any expectations of what you thought you were going to get out of it?
Not really, to be honest. I knew I wanted to work in something along the lines of strength and conditioning. And when I was younger, I kind of, same as most people who go into those sort of degrees, I kind of had my heart set on something in that kind of high performance setting with like team sport environment, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was literally more of a case of this is what I'm interested in. I'm just going to go study it, see where it takes me, and kind of see what happens. But yeah, like mainly young and naive, really.
Yeah. No, and I suspect that's fairly common with people. And it's probably easier to sort of make that leap in Australia because it's not like the US where you got to take out massive debts that, you're pretty much stuck with either until you die or you pay them off, because we've got the HEX system. It's sort of, if you're not earning enough, you can weather the storm a little bit more.
I think I definitely would have thought about it differently if I had seen the numbers straight away.
Like the cost.
Yeah. So because when you start, like you say, you just get HEX, you just get the help. So like you don't actually think about the numbers or see the grand total.
Yeah, when I was looking at courses and stuff, it shows you the cost for that course. There's no, I've looked at a bunch of different unis and I never saw one where it said the minimum cost for this total degree is going to be this. It's like, this is how much. So you sort of have to go through every single course and tally it up yourself before you see that it's like.
Yeah, there's no way I would have done that when I was 18. It's like, yeah.
Did you think about doing like a Cert 3 or a Cert 4 in fitness?
No, that actually never entered my head. When I was thinking about applying for uni, no, that never entered my head. While I was at uni, I did, but not before I started uni.
What was uni like?
It was good. There was I guess there's really two sides to that question.
Yeah.
In terms of like the social experience as well, because I definitely enjoyed myself a lot while I was at uni. But then the actual study side of it, it was good. It's actually really interesting to reflect on it now because, like you kind of alluded to before, in terms of what I thought I was going to get out of it, I didn't really know where it was going to take me in terms of what specific skills they were going to teach and that sort of stuff. But looking back on it now, obviously doing what I do now, you can see how it's very theoretical and very data-y, very researchy, as opposed to it's not as practical as I probably would have liked, like reflecting on it now in hindsight.
Yeah, so you think is it more sort of preparing people to go into the research side of sports science rather than like high-level coaching maybe?
I think so.
Yeah.
And that also could be partly because I didn't gear it enough towards that as well. So it's probably partly my fault a little bit.
Like the courses you selected?
Yeah, and also like with prac experience, I probably wasn't smart enough in regards to that sort of stuff. But it's definitely weighted more in terms of knowledge and research, because even now, because obviously we have interns that come into Real Fit now, and they can come in and tell you all about stuff like post-activation potentiation and these sorts of things, but they don't know how, if someone comes in and doesn't know how to squat, they don't know where to start them.
Yeah, you think that would be, yeah.
They know what a good squat should look like, but they don't know how to start teaching someone how to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, would they be able to tell you that's why a squat should look that way? Or they're just, this is what I've been told a squat's supposed to look like. And if it looks like that, it must be, like, I don't need to look any deeper than that.
I think that depends on the individual student. how into it they go. But I think it definitely falls along a spectrum there. I think they can all tell you what it should look like. And then some will be able to tell you to varying degrees why it looks this way and how they should go about fixing it. But yeah, you get a massive broad array of knowledge and skills there.
Do you find it particularly useful in what you're doing now?
My degree?
Yeah, the first degree.
Honestly, in terms of laying a foundation of knowledge, in terms of anatomy, physiology, that type of stuff, yes. So from that point of view, it's very useful. But in terms of the actual practical day-to-day stuff, probably not really.
Yeah, because I find, like, even when you do the Cert 3, Cert 4, you do get some basic anatomy and physiology. But I suspect it's the same with uni, where it's really important information, but that link between, essentially the bland theory stuff that you get and how it relates to the practical work you do, I find the little bit that I did at uni and the vocational level stuff, they never show you the value of how that theoretical knowledge can actually impact practical application and problem solving and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. And yeah, there's definitely that kind of missing link, because obviously you get all that knowledge, you learn all the muscles, all the anatomy, physiology type stuff, but you don't kind of learn to use that knowledge in a practical setting, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah.
So the guys and girls that come in here for the internships, did you have that sort of stuff available to you when you were at uni? Or is it something, you did have?
We did. So we did have that sort of stuff available, but it's just so limited in internships, because there's not a lot, especially back when I did uni, which is going back a little bit now. If you were going to do, say, if you didn't get an internship with one of, say, like basically the Brumbies or the Raiders, there was no kind of strength and conditioning coaches out there really, other than that. So if you were going to do any other stuff, it would have been in a clinic somewhere, or just not all gyms offer internships either. So maybe you could get lucky and get one in a gym somewhere.
Yeah.
And even then, it's kind of a bit of a lottery of the coaches you're going to be working with.
Like the people that are going to sort of mentor you through that process. And I guess the people you're going to be exposed to from the client side or the athlete side, if you're working with the Brumbies, they're probably, there's like a whole, probably 2 decades worth of pre-selection that goes into who ends up in that team. And I sort of wonder whether it gives people maybe a skewed perspective of, what they're expected to deal with out in the real world.
Oh, definitely. Because they kind of know how to they know what exercises to do and what combination of exercises to do to make someone, say, bigger and stronger and stuff, but they don't know how to teach them how to do the exercises. Yeah. Because they've already come in, no guys they're training know how to do the exercises. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As opposed to say...
They bring that competency with them.
Whereas, as opposed to, say, starting with someone who never squatted before.
Yeah, so for example, here at Real Fit, you might have someone who plays team sport and has been, doing it for quite a while, but has never stepped into a gym to sort of supplement their ability to play the game by coming into a gym. And they've got, all the, say they play AFL or something, they're great at that, but they've got no idea how to do a deadlift or a squat or...
Yeah, exactly. Some of them... Yeah, so you can deal with people who've literally never done anything in a gym before, which is kind of important. I think a lot of people who come out of university tend to lack in that area.
Yeah.
Being able to teach someone from the ground up.
Do you think that sort of lack of exposure maybe allows them, do you think they're probably overconfident? Not in the sense that they're arrogant, but they just haven't had that weakness. It hasn't been exposed for them, so they don't know that it's there.
Yeah, you might be right. It could be it could be something where they don't even know, they don't know how to do it. Yeah. Just because it's never been brung up, maybe.
It's certainly my experience with the people that have come in working here from uni, especially if they've come straight out of uni and they don't have that sort of background of real world experience. Their knowledge is awesome, but their ability to sort of solve problems that they haven't seen before sort of isn't there. And it's almost, for some of them, it seems like they don't even have, they don't know how to start finding the answer to those problems either. They're sort of just thrown into it and expected to figure it out almost.
Yeah, definitely. it's, yeah, you get there. It's almost like sometimes they'll get a problem. They don't even know you're right. They don't even know where to start to kind of start figuring out.
To be honest,
the
it's the
answer.
same with Cert 3, Cert 4. And then like the ASCA level, the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association level 1, like you have to do practical experience as part of all of those things, but you get a pretty dry, explanation of, for example, what a squat is and what the common faults are. But as soon as you come up with someone who's got a fault that wasn't in the book that you learnt from, you're sort of like, well, what the fuck am I going to do now?
Yeah. And it's also about knowing, is this fault something I need to correct, or is it something that's not that urgent, or is it
there's multiple faults and you're like, well, which one do I go after first?
Yeah, exactly. I think these are all things you only can really learn from experience. There's no other way you can figure it out. Like once you've seen enough people squat, you kind of have an idea of what someone's going to look like when they're a beginner, and you almost know the mistakes they're going to make before they make them.
Yeah, because the body can only move you have some joints like the shoulders and the hips and the spine to some extent that have massive freedom in how they move, but most of the joints are, they're going to be fairly simple joints that can only flex or extend or do basic things. And once you sort of realize that, you're sort of like, I'm actually going to see, a handful of problems that just vary in the way they present rather than 500 different problems. It's like 10 different problems that can have 100 different variations or combinations or something like that. And then it starts to become easier to sort of figure out what's going on.
Yeah, you just tend to see the same issues over and over again.
Yeah.
Once you start to see enough people. And obviously every so often there's someone who comes out and you're just like, what the fuck is that? Like, something you've completely never seen before. But yeah, see enough people, you just start to see the same things over and over again.
Yeah. So maybe, just sort of inject more practical experience into that. I mean, it'll probably extend the degree a little bit.
Yeah. And then I think it's also about, there's only so much prac you can do. And then it's almost about them just getting out there and just start doing it. And you've almost got to, that first year as well, they're not going to know everything. That first year is going to be a bit rough in terms of like...
Yeah, especially if it's super guided, practical experience where, the person running it knows what problems the person's going to have to solve. If you want to give them that confidence, just be like, you're going to go work here, do a placement for like a week or 2 weeks. And, hopefully you sort of vet the places they're going to work at. So, the coaches can sort of help them make sense of what they're dealing with and just be like, look, I can't tell you what problems you're going to face. You're just going to have to figure it out, and you're going to have these people to sort of help you.
Well, that's the other thing as well, because obviously a lot of people go on placement and they're not writing programs as such a lot of the time. They're just implementing programs written by someone else and working with people who've been taught by someone else. Yeah. So they're not actually doing that groundwork.
And their ability to sort of, I guess they probably don't have that much authority either then, because they can't really look at it and go, oh, now that I'm watching you, this isn't actually a very good exercise for you to be doing. Like say they've got push jerk or something like that, and like, dude, you don't even know how to like rack the bar properly and press it overhead. I need to regress you to a strict press. But if all you're doing is implementing someone else's plan, you can't make that call and then watch and see whether you made the right decision or not.
Yeah, and that is something I know we even find a little bit difficult here, trying to give them that sort of experience, because obviously clients come in here, particularly here, to work with specific coaches often. Yeah. So it's very hard to then give the intern, it's very hard to pass a client onto the intern because, they've come here to work with a specific coach.
Yeah, they're paying for it.
Yeah, so exactly.
Yeah.
So it's finding ways to give them those experiences is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if you wanted to give them that freedom, you sort of, I want to give you that freedom, but I also don't want to compromise, my long-term relationship with this person. So do you have to have
and what they
the intern and the coach together?
Yeah.
So that they can sort of supervise that process so it doesn't go too far off the rails.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's kind of what we've done, is involve them in the initial assessment phase and then the phase of sitting down and actually coming up with a plan and a program for that client. So it's kind of just involving them in that process as much as possible and trying to let them have a say before you kind of come in and just say, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. No, that seems like a pretty good way to do it. Okay, so after you did your sports science degree, you hung around and did it was a master's of exercise physiology. Now, can you help me understand what exercise physiology is? Because every time I look at like a definition of it, it's sort of hard to figure out, whether it's one thing or it's like a base level thing where you can go and do academic stuff or you can do rehab stuff or case management. It's sort of pretty broad.
Yeah, so you're right. There are kind of different streams you can go down with it. There's generally two kind of fields to it. There's kind of like the scientific side of it. So EPs who work in a lab where they're like analyzing different pieces of data and that information, that type of stuff. Then there's kind of your clinically trained EPs who work in a rehab setting. And then that can kind of branch off into case management stuff or your clinical work. And then the idea with the clinical rehab is to kind of try and fill that gap after someone finishes with, say, a physio. So generally the idea, in a perfect world, the way it would work is someone gets injured, they go see a physio initially because the physio does that initial rehab phase. Mm-hmm. Then after that, ideally they should get referred on to an EP to kind of then start rebuilding their exercise capacity.
Yeah.
So that's ideally how. Then after that, then they should go and work with a strength and conditioning coach. So then kind of keep building on top of what they've regained.
Do you find? I mean, I don't really know that much about the field. Do you reckon most EPs would be able to sort of fill that gap appropriately? Because I mean, like the few that I've come into contact with, I wouldn't necessarily be confident handing them from a physio to that EP. There's probably strength and conditioning coaches that I'd be much more comfortable handing them off to, just because they have that sort of understanding of that. It's almost that real world experience seems to sort of color their decisions a bit more.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual. So I do know some, the same as anything, I do know some really, really good EPs. And then you're right, then there's some others who I think they just don't have a broad enough experience of exercise. So I always encourage EPs to go and get some experience. If you're going to work as a clinical EP, I always tell them to go and get experience in a strength and conditioning facility so you understand the steps down the track.
Yeah, what you're preparing people for.
If you understand that, so if you have a specific goal in mind, you can prepare them to be able to do strength training in a gym. I think that really helps if you understand where you're going, where they're going long term.
I guess if I was in that position, I'd probably want to know which coach they were going to go to afterwards and be like, look, this is where they're coming from. Where do you want to take them so that you can sort of, so that you're working with each other instead, like there wouldn't be a hard stop of, okay, you've done your EP stuff. Now you're going to go to the gym. There'd probably be some overlap between the two.
Yeah, you're right. No, you're right. In an ideal world, that's exactly how it should work.
Yeah.
There should definitely be some overlap. And it's because it's not like there's a clear-cut point where you're like,
no,
you're done with the EP. It'd be like, if there's still exercise and stuff I need you to keep working on, but you're ready to start a bit more advanced stuff, for lack of a better word.
And I guess the cost as well. I mean, I think EPs have some sort of interaction with Medicare, don't they? Yeah. So you can get some of it covered on insurance.
Yeah.
But how much is the cost for the individual going to dictate how quickly they get pushed from an EP onto a strength and conditioning coach? I think not that strength and conditioning coaches are cheap necessarily either.
Well, that's the other thing as well. See, so the way rehab works at the moment, a lot of people most people just go see a physio for a couple of sessions and then that'll be it. And they think they're fine and they go away and they start to feel better and then all of a sudden their symptoms just come back again and they get stuck in that circle because they don't actually finish the process.
Yeah.
But you're right about the cost. So I think a lot of people will generally go and see a physio or an EP because they can get some of that money back quite often. But then they don't want to incur the ongoing expense of seeing a strength and conditioning coach. So that's where it usually stops. And I think money is definitely a factor in that.
So how is exercise physiology different to like the coaching science, sports science stuff that you've done? Like, were you pretty well set up for it on the theory side from what you'd done already?
Yeah. So it kind of just flows on really. Just goes more in depth down that kind of rehab path. is basically the main difference. So the coaching science degree that I did was kind of very general, strength and conditioning, anatomy, all these sort of basic principles, all that basic stuff. Then the masters in EP kind of just went more specific down that EP rehab route.
You finished your masters of exercise physiology, and then I think, hopefully I'm quoting you correctly, you said that you poured thousands of dollars into educational content after you'd done uni. And this is online stuff with, like, I think you was talking about like Eric Cressy and a few other people. What gap was that filling that you didn't get from uni?
So I guess that's kind of a longer story. So once I finished my undergraduate degree, I still didn't really know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I was still like, I have this degree, but I don't even really know what it qualifies me for, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So that was kind of how I kind of stumbled into doing EP, because I was like, well, that's kind of down the path I want to go, and that kind of gives me some sort of recognizable qualification.
So were you just hoping that, like, I don't know, like maybe, by the time I finish my coaching science degree, I'll have figured out what I want to do, and then you don't. So you go, well, I'll do X-Phys, and by the time I finish that, I'll probably know what I want to do.
Pretty much. Well, obviously once I started the X-Phys, I kind of knew that's where I was going to go with it, down that X-Phys route. But yeah, I kind of really just stumbled into it, and I kind of always knew that I wanted to do S&C. I wanted to be in strength and conditioning, but there's just limited opportunities. If you don't kind of get in that high performance setting, there's kind of nowhere to go with it. And there was never any mention when I was at uni of private sector strength and conditioning. Was
it a thing at the time?
Not really. Yeah. Not that I knew of anyway. Maybe that was once again my lack of knowledge on that area possibly as well. But it was never mentioned once at uni.
So when were you doing your masters?
I think it was 2011 to 2013. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you would have had like the boom of CrossFit boxes, sort of around then. But yeah, I don't know how much I think like powerlifting and strongman gyms were still kind of a fringe thing.
And even like box gyms like Real Fit, they kind of were, there was some obviously, but they kind of weren't a well-known thing.
Yeah. So when you're doing your uni stuff, most of it's sort of preparing you for like high performance stuff or academic stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's not a lot of opportunities like job wise in that. I mean, like, you think like how many people how many people did you graduate with for your sports science, for your coaching science?
Oh, in undergrad, a lot. It would have been at least 50 plus.
Oh shit. So you think say like half of those people go, I want to go into academia, and go, well, there's, say 100 schools and there's 10 academic positions in each school. But if 100 schools are graduating 50 undergrad sports science people and half of them want to go into academia, there's no way in hell that they're going to find those jobs. It's going to get super competitive. And you'd think like the amount of money they're going to earn is probably not going to be too crash hot because there's just massive oversupply. And then you go, I'm going to go into strength and conditioning, and you're like, oh shit, now I've got to pay off this huge debt, and I could have got this job with a Cert 3 or a Cert 4.
Yeah, and you're right. There's just limited demand for those roles. So those few people that go into academia, yeah, like you said, there's limited opportunities there. Then in terms of strength and conditioning, in terms of like a high performance setting, which is what that degree prepares you for, there's even fewer opportunities in that. So,
and I imagine it'd be like, I mean, aside from being super competitive, I imagine who you know is a huge part of getting those jobs. Like, people are vetted through their network essentially, and like, yeah, I don't know this guy, I'm busy, I'm not going to waste my time on this dude. Wait until someone gives you a recommendation or...
Oh, 100%. That was it. Like the people who got the better internships and stuff at uni, and then the ones who kind of got jobs afterwards. But it was all the people who just knew, who were either actually athletes in that system that were studying at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Or they just knew people and they kind of just got in through that way. Yeah. Which I'm not, which is just the way it goes. It's just the way it works.
I mean, Yeah, it's a bit shitty, especially. I mean, I can understand from their end why they'd want to do it that way, because you sort of got like finite resources in the sense of, you know, how much time you can dedicate to it, and using your network as a way of like essentially gatekeeping, you know, time wasters out is probably beneficial for them. But for the individual coming up, it's sort of like, you know, maybe your competency isn't as important as your relationships and your network.
Yeah, which is a really interesting point. And I think there is a lot of truth to that. And looking back, that's something that I definitely didn't do well in terms of the networking and that sort of stuff. So that's something I kind of push to a lot of people I know now that are doing degrees and stuff. Like the networking is massive. Yeah, like just make sure as many people as possible know your name by the end of that degree, because you just don't know. And it's just something that I didn't do very well. So I try and push that message to anyone I know that's doing a degree, really, particularly in exercise science.
So I got sidetracked by the academia thing. What were the courses and stuff you were doing afterwards? What did you say? What was the gap you said they were filling? It was more like the performance practical.
Yeah. Okay. So where I was getting to with that is I kind of finished EP, then I kind of went off work and doing EP work for a while, but I knew I wanted to do S&C stuff. But I realized I had that knowledge gap between, like, I knew all of this theory stuff, but if I was to like get someone actually in the gym, I would like applying that is where I thought I would struggle. So what I did was I started looking up. This is when I kind of first became aware that the private sector was a thing. Mm-hmm. Private sector strength and conditioning was a thing, and it was mainly through American coaches because it's massive in America.
Yeah,
but it's severely underdeveloped in Australia.
There's huge money behind it, especially like, you know, you look at all the college teams and it's, you know, multiple teams at a college. There's enormous amounts of money in some of them, and they're like set up equipment-wise pretty damn well too.
Yeah, so what I did was I started looking for coaches that were kind of doing this private sector stuff, and I just found pretty much the best ones I could find in America, and then just started consuming all the resources they had. So this is kind of the point where I realized I needed to learn off practitioners. I needed to start learning off the people who are actually doing the coaching, as opposed to like I'd learned pretty much as much as I could, not as much as I could, but I'd learned a lot off, well, everything I'd learned to that point had been off people in academia. So I kind of realized I need to learn off these coaches who are actually out there doing it and getting results with athletes.
It seems, I mean, like if part of the degree is preparing people for high performance stuff, it seems like a massive oversight that the people training people for that don't necessarily have that practical experience.
Yeah, it's weird because some of them did. Like some of the people who were lecturing and teaching us at uni, they had that practical experience, but it just wasn't always conveyed well, I don't think, in the teaching.
You think, like, but even then, like you think communication is a pretty important skill for a coach. I mean, I understand like teaching is somewhat different to communicating it, so especially when you're doing it in a big class environment. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I just got a chip on my shoulder about it.